There are a lot of things happening in the world. Pandemics, you can't work because there's another shutdown, or there's strife in your life, or things are really challenging and you're feeling exhausted. But in the end, what you're really trying to find anytime you're teaching or learning is you're trying to find a universal algorithm of how the brain works.
The nervous system of humans is designed to extract physical phenomenon from the universe that are non-negotiable, photons of light. I can't see in the infrared with my eyes.
What is true for all of us is that the brain is there always asking questions and trying to make predictions about its environment. All trauma, anxiety, fears, they all map back to stress in some way. Now, you can have stress without trauma, you can have anxiety without trauma, but you can't really have trauma without stress and anxiety. So even though there aren't really strict definitions of the boundaries between trauma and stress and fear, I think it's fair to say that trauma is a fear and or stress response that's happening at the wrong times, right? It's sort of carrying over from an experience that's making life uncomfortable or in some cases exceedingly challenging.
For example?
So someone has a sexual assault, somebody sees a car accident or is in a car accident, veterans come back from overseas. There's kind of first-person trauma where something happens to somebody, and then there's kind of third-person trauma where somebody sees something terrible happen. There's grief, and so there are a lot of categories, and so we don't want to complicate the landscape and the answer, but I think it's important for people to understand that the stress response is at the core of all of this. And when we talk about stress, I think it's also important that we divide that into two kinds of stress because it defines the two approaches that people can take to combat stress, fear, anxiety. Two types of stress are the one is the one we're almost all familiar with because when we hear stress, we think pupils dilating, hands shaking, heart beating, oh my goodness, or really upset, you're stuck in traffic, something is really bothering you, you're angry, you're having the fight or flight response that phrase gets thrown around a lot. And in those circumstances, it's very important that people take control of their mind and their body in a way that allows themselves to calm down, to reduce the so-called stress response. And we can talk about tools to do that are very concrete and that are very reliable. There's another side of the stress response. You're too activated, you're too alert, you're too agitated, and you want to be less alert, less activated, and less agitated.
The alert stress.
That's right. We could call it the alert stress, hyper-alert stress.
Hyper-alert stress.
Let's just do that for sake of conversation today. And we are by no means a nomenclature committee, so we can always revise later.
Yeah. There's
another side of stress, which is when there are a lot of things happening in the world. Pandemics, you can't work because there's another shutdown, or there's strife in your life, or things are really challenging and you're feeling exhausted and you can't get mobilized and alert enough. And this has never really been cleanly laid out for people. And what I call the whole process is one of limbic friction. Okay, so the limbic system are these areas deep in the brain. Limbic literally means edge, they're near the edge of the brain. And when we're stressed, there's a lot of activity in these brain regions. And then we got our forebrain, our prefrontal cortex for the aficionados. And when we're in a thinking and calm and deliberate and rational manner, when we can control our body and our mind, it's called top-down processing. We're controlling ourselves. But there's a lot of friction with that limbic pathway. I promise I'll get to the practices soon. So when there's this friction, we can call it limbic friction for sake of discussion. You can't control all those impulses and all that anxiety or fatigue for too long. And in fact, as you get more tired, or if someone has frontal damage, if they have brain damage to the frontal lobes, what you find is they become more impulsive. When they feel like sleeping, they just sleep, even if it's socially inappropriate. When they feel like yelling or screaming or swearing, they just do that. And so there's two kinds of limbic friction. One is when we're too activated and we want to calm down, and we're trying to say, okay, calm down. Don't say the thing that you shouldn't say. Don't do the thing you shouldn't do. And then there's the other kind of limbic friction, which is the world is happening really fast and we feel buried, we're overwhelmed, and we need to get more activated.
We need more energy.
We need more energy. We need to be able to lean into life, and we're feeling overwhelmed.
So the brain and nervous system, so it's like brain, spinal cord, connections with the body and back again. I don't distinguish between brain and mind. I think that's like a 80s discussion or earlier. And I think it would take us down the wrong track. So brain or mind to me is interchangeable. Mind-body is kind of interchangeable because the brain is connected to the body and the body's connected to the brain, right? If I pinprick my hand and it hurts, my brain registers it, where it happens. It's kind of an irrelevant discussion now. I think we really need to just appreciate that the nervous system is designed to orchestrate all the processes in the body, not just thinking and not just behavior. It really can be divided into 5 things. So there's sensation, and sensation is really bound or restricted by the receptors in the body. So receptors in the eye that perceive photons, light energy, receptors in the skin that perceive pressure, touch receptors, smell, taste, hearing, etc. And the interesting thing about sensation and the fact that the nervous system needs to pay attention to sensation is it's non-negotiable. The nervous system of humans is designed to extract physical phenomenon from the universe that are non-negotiable, photons of light. I can't see in the infrared with my eyes, and I can't see ultraviolet light with my eyes, and I can't perceive that because I don't have the receptors for it. So other animals can perceive some of those things, but that leads us to the next thing, which is perception, which is which sensations are you paying attention to? So all the time you're sensing things. Like right now, your feet are sensing the contact with your shoes, but you're not thinking about it until I say that. And then you shift your perception. Right. So perception is like this spotlight. So the brain wants to constantly bring in sensation. It's non-negotiable what's coming in. It's just dependent on your environment. Perception is negotiable. You can control that because I just said shoes and you thought about your feet and there you are.
How do you think our relationship with learning has been formed over time, hearing from your own as well?
I think it was the great physicist Max Delbruck who said that, when teaching, assume zero knowledge and infinite intelligence. I try and keep that in mind. I think that we are all innate learners by virtue of the fact that this nervous system, as it's called, is really a map of our experience. And it's there to form itself. It's unusual among the organs in that it shapes itself, right? Unlike the kidney or the liver, which doesn't constantly update its own form and function the same way. The nervous system is there essentially to educate itself so that it can operate better in a given environment. And once one understands that, you start to realize that the forms of learning are many. But in the end, what you're really trying to find anytime you're teaching or learning is you're trying to find a universal algorithm of how the brain works. And what I mean by that is that, all these nerve cells, they only can communicate through chemicals and electricity. It's really just meat in there, believe it or not. But there are algorithms that are universal. So whether or not one learns better verbally or visually, or whether one has a propensity for math or for verbal subjects, what is true for all of us is that the brain is there always asking questions and trying to make predictions about its environment. And I think what happens is when we're children, we are learning passively all the time. As we get older, and especially as we get to our mid and late 20s, it takes an immense amount of focus and energy in order to learn. But of course, the nervous system can still shape itself well into adulthood, almost certainly for the entire lifespan. But that focus and energy feels almost like an agitation. And I think that as children, we don't necessarily experience that agitation because we can, for better or for worse, we can experience and change passively. Neuroplasticity just happens by way of pure experience. As we get older, mid-20s, early 30s, and so on, that threshold of agitation for people feels like it's something to back away from. But if we can learn to approach that and understand that agitation is actually the circulation of chemicals, which is the brain and nervous system telling itself, aha, now I need to pay attention and change, we can start to actually modify the way that system works. So that's a bit of a convoluted answer to your question, but I think that at the heart of our nervous system is this ability, these algorithms by which it can change themselves. And it's on all of us to understand that bit of agitation and discomfort need not be interpreted as discomfort. That's the edge where learning is beginning. So confusion, being perplexed, feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the amount of information. That's actually the stir of chemicals that are cueing the nervous system to change, because if it can do something easily, there's no reason for the nervous system to change. Now, in terms of different styles of teaching and learning, I think that many of us experience that agitation early on, and we for reasons that are understandable, we backed away from learning anymore.